They told me it was for my own good, that I'd be happier with friends my own age, that it was only temporary, a place to recover after a mild fall in the kitchen. But the night they drove me there, my son David, his wife, and my granddaughter, I realized nothing temporary had ever felt so permanent. They didn't even help me unpack. They just left me standing there with my suitcase and a half-hearted hug. That smelled like guilt. I stood at the window of that sterile, sun-bleached room, watching their car disappear in the parking lot. My name still on the lease, my savings still in the account I'd opened with my late husband decades ago. At the time, I didn't know that money was gone, that the family I'd sacrificed for had emptied my account and signed me away. I only knew that the silence that followed felt like a prison. But then, before I tell you how it all unfolded, hit that like button, share where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive in. My name is Elaine, and at 68 years old, I never thought I'd be abandoned. Like a broken teacup, I moved into Green Pastures Nursing Home on a cold Monday morning in January. Snow dusted the ground outside, like powdered sugar on an old Christmas cake. I'd never imagined ending up in a place like this, a small, sterile room with a single bed, a metal dresser, and a window that didn't open more than a crack. It all started the day after my husband Howard passed. I'd spent 38 years building a life with him, our small garden, the swing on the front porch, the smell of his aftershave. In the morning, losing him felt like losing the ground beneath my feet. My daughter, Melissa, had been the strong one at first. She held my hand at the funeral, told me everything would be okay. But then she started dropping by less and less. My calls went unanswered. When she finally did visit, she brought along a man named Derek, a financial advisor, she called him. He smiled too much and talked too fast. "Elaine," he'd say, in that honeyed tone, "we're just making sure everything is in order for you." I signed papers. I didn't fully understand, trusting that my own daughter would never lead me astray, trusting that she remembered every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every cookie I'd baked when she felt sad, every time I'd stayed up late waiting for her to come home. 2 weeks later, Melissa told me she'd found the perfect place for me. "You'll love it, Mom," she said, her voice too bright. "You'll have friends, activities, a whole community." She made it sound like summer camp. But the first night, in Green Pastures, I felt like a guest in someone else's life. The smell of disinfectant clung to my clothes, and the nurse's smile was too practiced. Days blurred together, breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 5, a craft hour on Wednesdays, bingo on Fridays. I tried to find pieces of myself in the schedule, but every time I reached out, my hands came back empty. I asked Melissa to come visit. She said she was busy. "Derek and I have so much going on," she explained. "We're trying to expand the business." She promised she'd stop by soon. I asked about my savings, the money I'd worked 3 decades to build, the small investments Howard and I had made together, every penny we'd carefully set aside for emergencies and rainy days. Melissa brushed me off. "We've got it all handled," she said. "Don't worry about it." But I did worry. Every night, lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, I worried because the bills kept coming, and the monthly statement from the bank was different every time, and the small talk with the nurses, some of them so young, they could have been my granddaughters, couldn't chase away the feeling that I'd been left behind. One afternoon, a nurse named Katie came in while I was reading by the window. She had kind eyes, the kind that reminded me of my late husband. "Elaine, she said gently. Do you need anything? You seem distant. I wanted to tell her everything. The papers I'd signed, without reading, the savings, that were slipping through my fingers. The daughter I no longer recognized. But the words caught in my throat, so I just smiled and shook my head. But that evening, when the lights went out and the hallway was dark, I finally admitted it to myself. I was alone, and for the first time since Howard died, I wasn't sure how I'd ever find my way back. It was a Tuesday afternoon, cold and gray, like the world had decided. It was too tired to shine. I was sitting in the rec room of Green Pastures, half listening to a group of residents playing cards, when Melissa walked in. She was all smiles, wearing a crisp blazer and a silk scarf that looked new. Hi, Mom, she chirped, too cheerful, too bright. She didn't hug me, she just perched on the arm of a chair and folded her hands in her lap. Elaine, she started, I know this place isn't what you imagined. Her words felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing them, in front of a mirror. But Derek and I, well, we think this is the best thing for you right now. Best thing for me, my own daughter. Deciding my future like I was a broken toy she didn't know how to fix. Your health, Mom, you've been so tired, and the house is too much for you now. My health? I'd managed a 3-bedroom house and a small garden, all by myself. Since Howard passed, I'd cooked my own meals, paid my own bills, clipped my own coupons. I just want you to be safe, she went on. And Derek and I, we need to focus on the business. Things have been so busy. Business. The word tasted like ash. I stared at her. What about the money, Melissa? The savings Dad and I built? I trusted you with it. She looked away then, just for a split second. It's all taken care of, Mom. You don't need to worry about that anymore. A knot formed in my stomach. I want to see the statements. I want to know what's happening with my money. Her smile flickered. Mom, please. You're just stressing yourself out. Let me handle it. I'm your daughter. That was when the truth hit me like a slap. She wasn't here to visit me. She wasn't here to comfort me. She was here to remind me that I was no longer in control. She stood and brushed imaginary lint off her skirt. I'll come back next week. We're looking at some renovations for the house. Getting it ready, you know. Getting it ready for what? I asked, my voice trembling. She paused. Well, we're thinking of selling, maybe moving somewhere bigger. My breath caught. Selling? That's my home. She gave me that same, too bright smile. You're here now, Mom. This is your home. Derek and I, we need to think about the future. I felt the blood drain from my face. The betrayal wrapped itself around me like a cold hand. My daughter, the girl I'd held when she was sick, the one I'd comforted after every heartbreak, was standing in front of me, telling me that my life no longer belonged to me. And the worst part? She didn't even look sorry. She waved as she left, promising to come by next week. I sat there, staring at the spot where she'd been, feeling like a ghost in my own story. The card players kept laughing. The TV buzzed in the corner, and life at Green Pastures went on like nothing had changed, but everything had. Because at that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't just abandoned, I was stolen from. And that realization, sharp and cold, settled deep in my bones. I spent the next week in a daze, moving between the rec room, the dining hall, and the tiny room they called mine. But nothing felt like home. The walls were painted a shade of green. That made my head ache. And the air always smelled of bleach and canned peas. Every time the phone rang at the nurse's station, I hoped it was Melissa or even Derek. But it never was. One afternoon, I asked the staff manager if I could use the phone to call my bank. She smiled politely, but didn't meet my eyes. "Of course, Ms. Elaine." She handed me the receiver and then walked away. Before I could ask for privacy, the bank teller's voice on the other end was warm, but distant. "I'm sorry, Ms. Elaine, but your account balance is at $239.12. I blinked. "Excuse me? That's not possible. I had over $100,000 in savings. My husband's pension, my own savings. Where is it?" A pause. Then the woman spoke, voice cautious now. "It looks like your daughter and her husband were added as co-signers last year. They've made several withdrawals." "Withdrawals?" She hesitated again. "Large ones. Tens of thousands. I can email you the statements if you'd like." My hands shook as I scribbled down the email address. The call ended, but my world had already shattered. They'd taken it all. Every penny I'd saved. For a rainy day. For emergencies. For the quiet dignity of old age. When the email arrived, I saw the dates and amounts, vacations, home renovations, a business investment. That sounded more like a get-rich-quick scheme. All that money, gone, like I was just a line item on their balance sheet. That evening, I sat at the small wooden desk in my room, the bank statement spread out, like the remains of a crime scene. I tried to remember every time I'd said yes, every time I'd trusted them, every time I'd thought family meant protection. The staff here didn't see me as a mother who'd been wronged. They saw me as another elderly resident who needed extra care. Meals were scheduled, medication distributed with plastic smiles, and every question I asked was answered with that same patronizing tone. One night, I asked if I could get a cab. "To the library," the nurse patted my hand. "Elaine, let's not worry about that now. You need to focus on your health." Health. That word was starting to feel like a cage. Days blurred together, meals were bland, conversations were short. My world shrank to the four walls of my room and the echo of Melissa's words, "It's for your own good." One morning, a young volunteer came in to refill the water jug. She had a bright smile and kind eyes. "How's your day going, Ms. Elaine?" she asked. I looked at her optimism, her youth, and I wanted to scream. But instead, I just whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." She paused, placing the jug on the table. "You're still you," she said softly. "No one can take that." But I wasn't sure. I believed her, because with every day that passed, every unanswered call, every dollar stolen, I felt smaller, I felt erased. And in that nursing home, with its pastel curtains and plastic smiles, I realized that being alive and being seen were two very different things. The day I decided I'd had enough, the morning light was weak and cold. Through the narrow window, I sat on the edge of the bed, my feet dangling, just above the linoleum floor, and I stared at the faded pattern of the wallpaper. My mother's voice echoed in my mind from years ago, when she taught me to stand tall, even when the world felt determined to bring me to my knees. "Elaine, the world will only take from you what you allow." Something inside me shifted. I pulled out the old leather journal I'd carried. Since my husband Henry passed, it was worn and faded, but it still held every note. I'd written in the margins passwords, account numbers, names of old friends, even the lawyer's card. That Henry insisted I keep. I flipped to the page with the lawyer's name and number and dialed with trembling hands. When Mr. Harris answered, his voice was cautious but kind. I explained everything: Melissa, Derek, the withdrawals, the nursing home. He listened without interrupting, then sighed. "Elaine, you've always had more power than you realize. Legally, you still have rights. Even now, I can help you get your money back, and your independence too. But it starts with you wanting it. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I want it. Then we'll start by filing a report and freezing the account, he said, and I'll get the paperwork rolling. For a guardianship challenge, you don't belong in that place. If you're of sound mind, and you are. That was the moment I realized that I wasn't powerless. I had allowed them to treat me like I was invisible, but I wasn't. That night, I wrote a letter to Melissa and Derek. Not a plea, not a request, just the truth. I listed every withdrawal, every lie, every time they said it's for your own good, and I ended it with one line: I'm taking my life back. I slept for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I handed that letter to the head nurse, requesting it be mailed immediately. She tried to talk me out of it, gave me the same tired speech about my health and stability, but I just looked her dead in the eye and said, health is more than pills and mashed potatoes. It's the right to live with dignity. I called Mr. Harris again. He was already drafting the paperwork to reclaim what was mine. That night, I sat by the window, watching the sunset over the city, and I realized something. I'd almost forgotten. My name was still on that account. My life was still mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like Elaine again. Melissa's knock came at dusk. Just as the streetlights blinked on, I was in the middle of packing. A small suitcase, just a few clothes, a pair of sensible shoes, and that worn leather journal. That had become my lifeline. The knock was hesitant at first, then it turned urgent, heavy, like she was trying to beat the door down. I opened it a crack, and there she stood, hair unkempt, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling. Mom, please, you have to help us. Derek lost his job, and the mortgage is 3 months behind. The credit cards are maxed out, and we can't get approved for another loan. We need you. I stared at her for a long moment, taking in the desperation in her eyes. For a second, I almost reached out to comfort her, the same way I had when she was a child, when she scraped her knee or had a nightmare. But then I remembered the signatures on those withdrawal slips, the lies, the way they left me to rot in that place while they spent my money on new kitchen counters and spa days. Mom, Derek's voice came from behind her. He looked older now, lines etched deeper on his face, but I saw no remorse in his eyes, just fear. We know we messed up, okay? But we're family. We need each other. I opened the door wider. The hallway was silent, except for the creak of the old floorboards. I could see the panic in their faces, like they'd come to the wrong house, and the woman standing before them wasn't the mother they expected. Need me? I repeated, my voice calm, too calm. When you needed me, I was there every time. And when you decided you didn't, you left me in a nursing home, stripped of my dignity and my savings. Do you remember that? Melissa sobbed. It wasn't supposed to be like that, Mom. We were going to what? I cut her off. Spend every last penny? Wait for me to die so you could inherit the rest? You didn't even leave me enough to buy a cup of coffee. Derek shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't like that, Mom. We made mistakes. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every sleepless night in that nursing home, every whispered insult, every time I'd felt like a burden instead of a person. No, I said firmly. You made choices, and now you want me to clean up the mess. Melissa clutched her purse like it was a lifeline. Please, Mom, just this once. Just help us catch up. We'll pay you back, I swear. I shook my head slowly. Number I already paid. For your choices, with my home, with my health, with my trust. I'm done. Their eyes went wide, like they'd never imagined I could say no. Mom, Derek's voice cracked, if you don't help us, We could lose everything. I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. Then you'll know how it feels. I closed the door, slow, final. And in that moment, I wasn't just a mother who'd been betrayed. I was a woman who'd found her voice and finally used it. The morning after, I closed the door on Melissa and Derek. I sat on the edge of my bed. The early sun painted stripes of gold across the faded quilt. My hands were steady, a rarity these days. I held that small leather journal in my lap, the one I'd filled with every appointment, every receipt, every moment of betrayal. As I traced the lines of ink, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet acceptance that I'd never felt before. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by what I could give, what I could sacrifice, what I could forgive. But sitting there in the hush of my small apartment, I realized I was more than the sum of their needs. A knock on the door startled me. My heart beat faster. But when I opened it, it was just the building manager. He handed me a small packet, my new lease, the one I'd fought so hard to get signed without their interference. A one-bedroom unit, paid in full for the next year. My name on the dotted line, nobody else's. "Congratulations," he said. "It's all yours now." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you." As he left, I placed the papers on the table and sat back down. I thought about the children I'd raised. So many years of scraped knees, piano recitals, late-night fevers. So many times I'd said yes when I should have said no. I thought about all the ways I'd let myself become the easy answer, the first call, the fallback plan. And then I thought about last night, about the look in their eyes when I said no. The shock, the disbelief, the realization that I wasn't theirs to command anymore. I reached for my phone. Melissa had texted 3 times since last night. "We can work this out," she'd written. "Please call me." I didn't reply. I didn't owe her my silence, but I didn't owe her my attention either. Instead, I scrolled through the photos on my phone, pictures of sunsets, of flowers I'd grown on the windowsill of the art class I'd started at the senior center. I saw the woman I was becoming, someone who said no when it mattered, someone who'd chosen peace over obligation. I thought about that nursing home, the linoleum floors, the smell of bleach, the loneliness. I thought about how it felt to lose everything I'd worked for, to feel like I was just waiting to die, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and regret. And I promised myself, never again. I picked up my journal and flipped to the last page. "Today, I chose myself," I wrote. "Today, I took back my life." I set the pen down, a small smile curling at the edge of my lips. Outside, the world was waking up, cars starting, dogs barking, neighbors chatting in the hallway. Life moved on, even after the people you trusted tried to break you. I stood up, pulled on my coat, and opened the door to the bright morning. Freedom felt different this time, like a sunrise. That was finally mine. And as I walked down the street, past the park, where kids were already playing, I felt lighter than I had in years, because I wasn't just leaving behind betrayal, I was stepping into a life that was mine to define, and that, I realized, was worth every no I'd ever said. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my shoes, betrayed, left alone, and forced to find your own strength? Would you forgive them or walk away for good? Share your thoughts. In the comments below, I read every single one, and your stories mean the world to me. If this story touched you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life tales of family of resilience, and of hard-won independence.